Ardina, you're on.
Hello out there in Radio Land, in Viewing Land. I am Ardina Stewart, along with Charlie Stewart, Peter Moses, and this is 914 Wired. And our guest today is Justin Brasch, and he's brash. No, he's not brash. Justin is a...
No, he is. He is, actually.
He is. Well, this is the time, honestly, guys, this is the time to be brash. Justin is a White Plains City Councilman, and today we are going to discuss the interesting state of affairs in the Jewish community, along with other topics related to that. So, Justin, introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Justin Brasch. As you heard, I'm a councilman in White Plains. I'm a former council president, and I was the chair of the White Plains Youth Bureau for 4.5 years. Before I joined the council, I served on the planning board for the city of White Plains, and before that, I served on the budget committee, the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee for Westchester County for about 10 or 12 years. I've been an activist all my life. I got my start when I was 17 as an intern for Congressman Ted Weiss. I then stayed on the West Side for many years. I was the president of the Ansonia Independent Democrats, and then I became the state committeeman for the West Side, and then the famous Denny Farrell had me appointed to the executive committee of the State Democratic Party where I served. And then I got married. My wife said, I want to have a house in a backyard. And I said, there's one place we can move to, the city of White Plains. So I said, the reason we moved to White Plains is pretty much 2 or 3 things. Well, I can't deny we both work in the city, so it's an amazing commute. But the main reason is it's a down-to-earth and a very diverse city. Everybody gets along, and that's very important to us. And interestingly enough, you're talking about the Jewish community. One of the things that we loved is that the 5 synagogues in Israel all get along, and the Jewish community all gets along. And no different than any other community, that's unusual.
I don't know. I'm not so crazy about the Scarsdale members of TIC, but that's another topic.
All I'll tell you is the community in White Plains. I joke, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. Moving to White Plains was not one of them. It has worked out really well. It was a great place to raise my family. It's a very safe place. It's a very beautiful place. The city services are great. Our neighbors are really diverse and different, and it's really just been a home run.
Justin left off his profession. He is an attorney.
Yeah.
I am an attorney.
I'm
a real estate attorney in New York City. I do landlord, tenant, and leasing, and I'm happy that my practice is predominantly it's all in New York City. I have one case at a time in Westchester, so there are no conflicts and no problems, so I can sleep at night.
So Justin,
you were active in...
Sorry.
Go ahead, Peter.
You went to the Israel parade yesterday.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us how that went, what you thought of the NYPD security? Were there any lapses, and anything else you want to comment on that?
Well, okay. I'll tell you that I go most years. I deliberately with the Westchester Jewish Council, and they're always very welcoming and very terrific. And I would say that there are always a lot of people at the parade, tens of thousands. My understanding is there were tens of thousands more this year. I can definitely confirm that as somebody who marches every year.
Now,
I'm sorry, Charlie.
How is that going to work? So if George Latimer is successful in his campaign for Congress, he will vacate his final year as county executive, and the deputy will automatically become the county executive for 1 year? Is that how that works?
The county legislature appoints an interim county executive.
And it may or may not be the deputy?
It can be anyone. It could be Charlie Stern. I believe very strongly that it will be. I believe very strongly that it will be Ken Jenkins, and I believe that. I believe it's 90 days after the appointment. There's an election, a nonpartisan election, just a straight election. And it will probably be in February, is my understanding. Probably late February would be my best guess, and that would be the first election. And then there's
there's a general election in February that you have to go through ice and snow to get to, so it's easy for the politicos to control.
Well, it's the 90s. I don't think it's. Times when I believe it's set up by the politicos, I believe that this is the system. Lord knows Ken Jenkins, Justin Brasch, and George Latimer didn't set this up. So they're going to, that's the procedure. So there will be an
So the
election.
and that
Rules
procedure
90
is under.
days after. If George Latimer were to quit sooner, right, which I doubt, he has to make a living like most of us, the election would be 90 days after that.
And that's under county law or that's state law?
I'm pretty sure that's state law. That's state law.
Not Sharia law.
Sharia
Right.
law. No, that's in Hamtramck, Michigan. But let me ask you this, Justin. Going forward, do you think that if Trump is elected president, that it will be easier for the Jewish population that he will do something about anti-Semitism in the current climate than it is, or do you think it could be worse, or do you think it would just stand status quo?
I think that he's a very unpredictable person and that he goes where the wind blows. And it could be better and it could be worse. And no one really ever knows what he's going to do. And that's what scares me more than anything about him. The unpredictability is what scares me. We saw on January 6th, he tried to take over the whole United States of America. I mean, he's a very unpredictable person. On one day, he could be very pro-Jew and very pro-Israel. And I believe the next day he could not be. I don't really know where any of his true loyalties lie except to himself.
Biden has said subtly about bringing in Palestinian refugees as a result of the war. I don't think it's been expanded that much, but it's out there. So, what are your feelings on that?
I guess my biggest feeling about that is sort of unrelated. If we're going to bring, if there are refugees, right? The Muslim population is over 1 billion people, right?
Yeah.
I kind of always wonder why it's a small population, the Palestinian population, why other Arab and Muslim countries would not open their doors to them. They have a cultural connection, they have a religious connection, they have a population. They're either Arabs or Muslims or both. It's a little bit, Israel has something like 15 million people. It's a very small place. So it would seem to me that if there are some refugees, it would be, really not the best place to come to the United States.
You know what most people don't understand, Ardeen? You know what most people don't understand? If you look at Jordan, Jordan was created the same Balfour Declaration that created Israel. There was no kingdom there. That land was united, in a sense, with what is now Israel. Over 50% of people who work for Jordan are Palestinians,
Right.
and they are not citizens. The Palestinians have not been made citizens in any of these other countries. They're
Certainly
the
not in
Jews.
Lebanon. In Lebanon, they're living in refugee camps. In Syria, they're treated, and they don't have Israel's not an imperfect place, but certainly the Israeli Arabs in Israel are entitled to full rights, and they sit on the Supreme
right.
Court and in the Knesset. And the Palestinians that may not have voting rights are protected in a much greater way than they are in the rest of the Arab or Muslim world.
And don't forget that they're also. I'm sorry. Don't forget that there are also Palestinians themselves that are marginalized. I mean, the women, some LGBTQ
Well, you
community
also
which
know
really doesn't
that
exist.
you know that the Palestinians are very racist and that there's a black section of Gaza and it's looked down upon.
Absolutely. I wrote articles about that. There are Afro-Palestinians, African Palestinians that are taking a lot of heat
They are
because they're
treated
being
like
discriminated
second-class
against,
citizens.
and they're treated like second-class citizens. So there
But
are.
let's be honest about it. Until very, very recently, the Falasha Jews, the Ethiopian Jews, were not treated like equal citizens by all of Israeli society. The Ashkenazi who founded Israel.
Stop right there. I wouldn't deny that
No.
the Ethiopian Jews were treated as equally, but you must remember they were living in a far worse condition in Ethiopia, and the Israelis, at tremendous political, military, and every other kind of risk, took them out and rescued them. And I agree, in the first generation it wasn't great, but today it's a lot better.
I just said it's better now.
But Peter, but racism in Israel, so-called racism is very different than it is in the United States. Remember that in the 70s, you had the Israeli Black Panther movement, and they said it was the Black Panther movement because it was the Jews that came from Arab countries, the Moroccan Jews Jews that came from basically the darker Jews, were catching a lot of heat from the Ashkenazi Jews. And they weren't getting the jobs that they felt they should get. And they had a Black Panther movement so that the darker Jews were able to be accepted and were able to be treated well. Don't also remember that I think it was roughly 4 years ago, the first Black Miss Israeli was elected in Israel. She's a stunningly gorgeous Ethiopian.
Ardina, I'm not arguing that Israel has treated Africans worse than any other country. It's just that when we talk about how people are treated, and you were talking about the Gazan, the Black Palestinians.
Black Gazans, yeah.
Israel also has had growing pains about how they treat people who are a different color than the majority of Israeli
this goes
society.
back to the other point we were talking about is after the war in 1948, when the UN divided and created the State of Israel and all the Arab countries attacked and tried to destroy Israel, 850,000 Jews were thrown out of all of these countries.
I know.
I mean, families that had been in Yemen and Algeria and Morocco for
Iraq?
2,000 years,
3,400 years probably, in Iran and Iraq and Syria.
They were all sent out. All their lives and their everything, their money, their families, their everything were sent to Israel. And Israel did a great job integrating them, but they did.
I want to talk to everybody about this. College students in the United States go with trends and the latest thing they can protest. Do any of you believe that these protests on campus are going to end anytime soon until they find the next thing to protest? Because I don't. I think that this is being funded by oil countries, and they're well organized, and this is going to continue for I don't know how long, but I'm fearful. Charlie, Ardina, Justin, please.
Well, I just want to say one thing. Sorry, Charlie, I just want to say one thing. You do know that when they went in on the Columbia campus recently, they cleaned some students out again, and half of the people on campus were not Columbia students, and some of them are outside agitators. And the police department said flat out they had propaganda explaining how to resist, who to put women at the front of the line, men in the back. It was a very organized, and it's believed that Iran and Hezbollah and others are behind all of this agitation.
Exactly.
But half were students, and my opinion is they are never going away. And you are seeing the beginning of a long arc of protest in America.
Besides that, though, Charlie, I know that you're Jewish. I know your kids don't look classically Jewish.
What's classically Jewish?
Have you had any concern about college, about universities?
Of course, I have a lot of concern. The campuses are going to continue to be places that are not as safe and tranquil as they used to be. Yes, of course, I'm concerned.
Justin, you have kids who are either in college or near college.
Yeah, I have a son in high school, and both of my daughters are currently in Israel studying.
I think that the Israeli, Palestinian war has made the entire world a less safe place.
Yes.
And I don't see that reversing anytime soon.
This is correct.
Did you hear what happened in Vancouver over the last few days? They firebombed a synagogue. Over the weekend in Amsterdam, a group of people found a Jewish guy, chased him, and I understand they knocked him around. There was an incident with an automobile where some guy in a car in Brooklyn.
It was in Brooklyn. Yeah. And you know what's profoundly sad about that? The people that he's chasing with that car may not even be Zionists, and they're probably not politically active. The only thing they look is they're wearing yarmulkes. So that's like profoundly sad. He's chasing the wrong.
There's nothing new with that type of classic anti-Semitism. I'm sorry to say, I'm not happy about it, but it's historically
it's
the way
sad.
It works out.
And he's chasing around the wrong people. But I can tell you this: the best summary I've seen of this entire global kerfluffle, for lack of a better term, is that essay that Chuck Schumer wrote about 2 months ago, where he said there are 4 things that need to happen to unravel this. And I hope I can remember them all. One was the leader of the Palestinian Authority, I think it's Abbas.
Mahmoud
He's,
Abbas.
he's got to
Mahmoud
go.
Abbas.
He's got to go. Benjamin Netanyahu has to go. I don't remember what the other 2 things were. One was, okay, I'll put in the show notes. I'll put a link to the transcript of that essay. But there were 4 specific points, and I think it starts with Netanyahu. I think that government, the Likud party, and Netanyahu, the Israeli people don't like him, and they're making the entire world less safe, and they need to go.
But then who
And his own
replaces him?
cabinet it's got fissures in it that's clearly very obvious.
Well,
Israeli cabinets have had fissures.
It has some very, very extreme separatists who just don't think the way modern normal people like us do. Period. I mean,
But you have but you know there's a larger issue now that's looming in Israel that threatens to get Netanyahu out faster than you think. The whole issue about the Hassids in conscription service. There's a big debate now in the Knesset saying that if that law passes, then the right wing faction of the Israeli Knesset will bring down the government. If Hasidim have to serve in the Israeli army. And on the other hand, you have a shortage now of manpower to run this war. The guys that were there before are winding down. You have reservists that are 50 years old, some maybe even older. So you have to have, this is an all hands event. So the government.
I'm sure, Ardina, I don't know if you're aware of this, but you're right. But there are a group of veteran pilots in Israel who have said if Netanyahu doesn't leave, they're not flying anymore.
No, but that was during the judicial thing. I haven't seen that since then.
I saw something today. I don't know how new it was, but I saw something today.
But then who takes his place? I mean, there's a guy named, I think it's Lapid, who's very sharp, speaks fluent Spanish, of course speaks fluent Hebrew, and he's like chomping at the bit to take over for Netanyahu. He's charismatic, he's fantastic looking, the whole 9 yards. So between
I met with him during our solidarity trip to Israel with George Latimer in November.
There
What'd
you
you
go.
think? What'd you think?
He wants the job. He wants the job.
He's a very impressive guy. There's no question. But
he wants the job. He wants the
absolutely job. He wants the job, and so does Benny Gantz. There are a lot of people who want to be the prime minister of Israel.
I found it.
Golda Meir used to joke around. That in her country, she has at the time, I think it was, that there are 6 million prime ministers.
Charlie, you're out of focus, Charlie.
This is should be doing okay. I'm looking at the monitor. I think it's your screen.
Okay, it's my screen.
Yep.
No, you're out of focus, Charlie. Here on my.
You're out of focus.
So I don't know if you move the camera or if it's just a quirk in the program.
I think it's an internet. I think it's an internet connectivity.
Okay,
issue
I'm just letting you know. That's
resolve itself because I'm looking at the monitor. It looks okay, and I think the recording will be right. But so you can hear me though, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Your audio's
so
fine.
this is April 15th. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. These are his words. There are 4 major obstacles. They are: number 1, Hamas and the Palestinians who support and tolerate their evil ways; 2, radical right-wing Israelis in government and society; 3, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas; and number 4, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And to the extent I understand it, which is limited, 9,000 miles removed, those 4 things need to happen. None of them have budged. None of them have budged. And I suspect that this is going to continue to rail on for decades. And it will continue to make the world less safe. It's rolled up, it's washed right up into Westchester County, New York politics, Justin.
Right.
This election with George is a referendum on Israel. Do you agree with that statement? And what do you think is going to be the verdict?
Well, I definitely think that George Latimer is going to win. I was one of the people who worked very hard to try to convince George to run. Jamaal Bowman treated me terribly, and that's something we probably should talk about. As somebody who cares deeply about all communities, but I have a special responsibility to my own community, like most politicians. So before he was my congressman, I was at the Black Women's Political Caucus dinner a couple of years ago. And, it's of course predominantly black or African American. And I was talking to Andrea Stewart Cousins, who I have a fantastic relationship with, and two people over was Jamaal Bowman. So I went over to him and I said, Congressman Bowman, I'm Justin Brasch. I'm an unimportant person. I'm a councilman in White Plains, and I know you're an important congressman. And I had heard, of course, many bad things about him. I said, I'd really like to get together, just the two of us, have a cup of coffee and talk about Israel and issues of concern to the Jewish community. And I expected him, like most public officials, to say, sure, that's a great idea. And he turned to me and he said, why? And I said, well, let's just get a cup of coffee and we'll talk. And he said, why? And that persisted. And then I said, well, people say things about you, and I have no idea if they're true or not. And, basically, I'm a bridge builder. That's the way I was raised. And I didn't say that, but I was like, I'd really like to talk to you and hear what you have to say.
Did you get the cup of coffee?
It's a terrible story. I forced it, yes. So what happened is he did not give me the cup of coffee then, I assure you. He was very antagonistic, very angry with me, very mean, very disrespectful. So about 6 months later, my good friend, as I told you, Ken Jenkins, our deputy county executive, and I were talking, and Jamaal Bowman came up, and I said, well, the guy won't meet with me. And Ken said,
this is all pre-October, right? This is all pre-October.
Oh, this is way before.
Okay.
So it started 2 years ago. It was probably a year or two ago that Ken and I talked, and Ken said to me, I can get you in touch with Jamaal Bowman. I'll set it up. Don't worry. You're one of my friends. It'll be fine. 2 weeks later,
Justin, what did you want to talk to him about?
I'll get to that. Don't worry. I said, well, look, I had heard that there's one of the most prominent rabbis in the world lives in Riverdale, somebody named Avi Weiss.
I know Avi.
Right. So Avi Weiss.
I know him all too well.
Okay. And Avi Weiss wanted to meet with Jamaal Bowman, and Jamaal Bowman refused to meet with him. So that, of course, set me on fire of like, who is this guy? Not that you can disagree with him, but you're really not supposed to not meet with somebody like that. And he's a respectful, nice enough person. You may have a political disagreement, but that's what being a congressman or a public official is all about. I mean, it'd be one thing if he was a disrespectful, So I said to myself, okay, I'm going to try to meet with him. So at any rate, Ken Jenkins called me back 2 weeks later and was like, he doesn't want to meet with you.
Well, he eventually ended up going to Israel, and I don't know if
No, this is way after his trip to Israel. Way after his trip to Israel. Okay.
No, but I think that's significant what Ardeen is saying. So this was after the Israel trip, because again, just based on what I've read, I feel like maybe something about his view changed after that visit to Israel. I think that could be meaningful.
I don't believe it. I believe his view was fixed before he went to Israel. Because he refused to go to Israel with AIPAC, which is the way the normal people go.
What do you believe his view is, Justin? What do you believe his view is?
I really don't believe that he cares about the Jewish community in the state of Israel.
Wow.
Or here.
But the thing is, in fairness, there is, when you go to Israel and you see how Israel is divided, and I say this with caution to some extent, there is a line that separates the Palestinian section from the Jewish section. The last time I was there, people coming from the West Bank had to use different colored license plates. There was a line of demarcation that they weren't able to cross. And for the person who doesn't understand what's going on there, it can be jarring because it is apartheid.
Right. White Plains City Council member Justin Brasch, we're going to have to wrap it up for today because we're running a little bit long here. I appreciate you coming in here and sharing some perspective on what's happening on the global scene, but also, back here at home.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure. I want to come back and talk about local government in the city of White Plains, okay?
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Take care.